The HOA president ripped the court-ordered sticker off my fence, grinning like she'd won. "This is a violation," she said, not knowing she was breaking the law. I stayed calm, watching her toss the sticker aside like it was nothing. But what she didn't know was that I was recording. When she saw the red light on my phone, her smile vanished. What she thought was a small victory, it was the start of something much bigger. And soon, she'd regret messing with me. The HOA president, Claire Weston, stood there, her hands on her hips like she was the queen of the neighborhood. Her blonde hair, stiff and perfect, was like a helmet, and that smug look she always wore was aimed directly at me. "This isn't how we do things around here," she said, her voice sickly sweet. She pointed at the empty space on the fence where the sticker used to be. "That's an eyesore, and it violates community guidelines. I've got every right to remove it." I didn't blink. "You're not just violating community guidelines, Claire. You're violating a court order." She laughed, dismissing me with a flick of her wrist like I was a pesky fly. "That's cute. You're threatening me with the law, but the only law that matters here is the HOA code. You better get used to it." Her sons Alex and Mike flanked her, their presence like a wall of muscle. They were the perfect enforcers. One built like a fridge, the other a little slower, but both had that same entitled look, like they were born to intimidate. I knew what this was. Claire had ruled this neighborhood for years, pushing people around with her little rule book, making sure everyone was too scared to challenge her. But today, she'd just made a huge mistake. I wasn't scared of her, and I wasn't about to back down. A few days after the incident, with the court-ordered stickers, Claire Weston, the HOA president, didn't waste any time. I found a note pinned to my door. It was the usual HOA nonsense: property violation, unauthorized signage, fine of $500. I chuckled bitterly. Karen's little enforcers had been busy. They didn't care that the stickers were legally mandated, and they didn't care about the court order. They were trying to make me pay to punish me for standing up to her. The note was just the first of many. Over the next week, I got fines for things like unapproved outdoor decorations, my Christmas lights still up in March, a non-compliant fence post, which was legally installed, and improperly parked vehicles, my motorcycle parked in front of my house. It was relentless. It was clear what Claire was doing, pushing me, hoping I'd crack and pay to make it all go away. But I wasn't about to roll over. I kept all the fines, all the notes, and even started documenting every little harassment, every little violation they tried to force on me. I was ready. Claire didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of my counterattack. A few days after the fines started rolling in, I saw Claire on my property again. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought her sons, Alex and Mike, who looked like they'd been sent to intimidate me. They were standing by the fence, looking over it like they owned the place. "What are you doing?" I asked, walking over. Claire turned, hands on her hips, giving me that look. "We're just making sure everything's in order. It's our job to enforce the HOA rules." I could feel my temper rise. "This is private property. You're trespassing. Get off my land." She didn't budge. Instead, she pointed to the fence. "This needs to be redone. It's not up to code." "You're insane," I snapped. "The fence is exactly as the court ordered. I'm not touching it." But Claire wasn't listening. Her sons started measuring the fence like they had the right to inspect it. Alex was taking pictures and Mike was writing something in a notebook. It was all a power move, an attempt to make me feel small. I walked up to them, my voice low. "Get off my property. Now." Alex looked up, sneering. "Make us." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about the fence or the stickers anymore. It was personal, and it was escalating. The next morning, I went outside to check on my yard, only to find that Claire had sent a crew to maintain the property next to mine. They weren't just trimming the grass. They were digging up a strip of land along the fence line land that I had legally fought for. The dirt was being moved, the markers shifted. I felt my stomach drop. She was doing it again, stealing what was rightfully mine. I stormed over to her, but Claire was already standing there, arms crossed, watching her workers. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Fixing the property line," she said with a sickly, sweet smile. "You should be thankful we're doing this for you." I couldn't believe it. "You're violating the court order again. This is my property, Claire." She didn't even flinch. "Not anymore. It's part of the HOA's communal upkeep. We've decided to expand the boundaries, and your property is part of it." My fists clenched. "That's not happening. You need to stop this now." But it was too late. The damage was already done. She'd started moving the markers, and I had no choice but to get my lawyer involved again. But this time it was different. I wasn't going to let her push me around again. This was no longer a petty dispute over a few feet of land. It was war. I could see Claire's arrogance growing with each passing day. She was pushing me further, taking advantage of every legal loophole to continue her reign of terror. so I decided to take it up a notch. One afternoon, I received a knock at the door. It was the sheriff. He handed me a notice from the HOA, another violation. This time it was about the unauthorized modifications to my property. Claire had gone straight to the sheriff's office to report me for not complying with her rules. I stood there, staring at the deputy, trying not to lose my cool. "This is a joke," I muttered. "She's got no authority here." The deputy gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm just doing my job. The HOA's got their complaints." I shook my head. "You don't understand. She's breaking the law. These fines, this harassment, it's all illegal. She's using her position to push me around." The deputy didn't say much more, but it was clear that Claire had pulled some strings to get the sheriff involved. She was trying to make me back down, trying to force me into submission with the weight of the law, but I wasn't going anywhere. If anything, this was only pushing me closer to a breaking point. Then the letter came. It arrived one morning in a crisp white envelope, the HOA logo embossed on the top. I knew immediately what it was. Another fine, more threats. But this time it wasn't just about property violations. I tore open the envelope, reading through the list of charges. Unauthorized modifications, non-compliant fence, violation of HOA code behavior. Total amount $2, $500. My blood boiled. I knew this wasn't the end, this was her final push. Claire wasn't going to back down. She was going for broke, using the HOA as her personal weapon to crush me. I called my lawyer immediately. The situation had reached its boiling point. I could no longer stand by and let her ruin my life, my property, my home. It was time to take action. The stakes were higher now, and I had to get creative. Claire had crossed the line one too many times. She had pushed me to a point where I couldn't let it slide anymore. This wasn't just about the fence. This wasn't about the fines. This was about justice, and I was going to make her pay one way or another. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The HOA president had made a serious mistake, but this time it was my turn to fight back, and I had no intention of losing. The HOA board meeting felt like a showdown in a dusty courtroom. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and stale air, and the folding chairs creaked under the weight of the dozen or so residents scattered around. The board members sat at the front, Claire Weston perched in the center, like a queen on a throne, surrounded by her loyal subjects. I sat in the front row, my briefcase tight under my arm. I wasn't there to play by her rules. Today I was going to flip the script. Next on the agenda, Claire announced, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, is the appeal of Mr. Michael Turner regarding violations at 112 Oak Drive. The crowd shifted in their seats. A few familiar faces glanced at me, and for the first time, I noticed the weight of their gazes. Claire's smug smile grew as she looked directly at me. "You've been fined for 3 serious violations," Claire said, her eyes narrowing. "Do you have anything to say for yourself before we vote to uphold these fines?" I stood, my heart pounding, but my movements were calm, calculated. My voice rang clear as I spoke. "Yes, Claire, I do have something to say." I walked to the lectern, my briefcase clicking open with a sharp, definitive sound. I laid out the documents one by one, each one a hammer waiting to drop. "This," I said, holding up a high-resolution photo, "is a picture taken 2 days ago. It shows you, Claire, personally tearing down the court-ordered stickers you're now fining me for. You think I'd let you get away with that?" The room went quiet, the air thick with tension. Claire's eyes darted to the image. For a moment the arrogant smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered, trying to regain control. "That's not what happened," Claire snapped. "I was removing unauthorized signage." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Let's move on." I pulled out another document. This is a copy of the court's final judgment. It states that I am legally required to install a fence on the property line and post the notices you so graciously decided to remove. I glanced at the crowd, watching their expressions change from bored indifference to curiosity. I didn't need to say much more. The evidence spoke for itself. "I'm sure everyone here can see the problem. The fines you've issued for my fence, they're completely invalid because it's what the judge ordered. And the fines for the signage, well, you've already admitted to removing them. That's a crime, Claire." The board members shifted uncomfortably. I could see Claire's face turning bright red, the realization sinking in. She wasn't in control anymore. I was. Claire slammed her hand on the table, her voice cracking with rage. "This is outrageous," she screamed. "You're out of order, Michael. You're not going to turn this room into your personal courtroom." I leaned in, my voice rising but steady. "Am I? Or am I the first person in this room who's not afraid of you?" The room fell into an eerie silence. The other board members, Bob, Gary, and Martha, looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other like they didn't know where to turn. For the first time in years, they weren't just following Claire's orders, they were starting to question her. And as for these fines, I continued pulling out the final piece of evidence. I'm not the one who's breaking the law. You are. You've been using the HOA as your personal cash machine, issuing fines for things that don't even exist. But what you didn't count on is someone standing up to you. Claire tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. You've made it clear that this isn't about rules. It's about control. But it's over now, Claire. This isn't a fight for a few feet of property anymore. It's a fight for justice. I turned to the room, addressing the residents. You don't have to live in fear anymore. Claire Weston has been using this HOA to bully, intimidate, and rob you, but you have the power to change it. Together we can stop her. Claire shot up from her chair, her face twisted in fury. You think you've won. This is far from over, Michael, but it was too late. The damage was done. The board members were already leaning toward me, looking to back my claim. The truth was out, and Claire's control had slipped through her fingers. As I walked out of the room, I could hear the murmurs of the crowd. It wasn't just about my case anymore. It was about the whole neighborhood reclaiming their power. Claire had been dethroned. The battle wasn't over, but her reign, it was finished. This was the turning point, the moment where everything changed. Claire Weston's empire had started to crumble. She could no longer hide behind her lies. The community had seen her for what she really was, and there was no going back now. The war had begun, and I was winning. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but I wasn't listening to them. I was watching Claire, whose face was still flushed with anger and humiliation. The room was different now, quieter, filled with people who no longer feared her. She had lost her grip, and the community was waking up. As I stepped out of the courtroom, I was greeted by a few familiar faces, people I'd never expected to stand up to Claire. There was Vinny, holding one of his awful flamingo decorations like a trophy. He gave me a thumbs up. "You did it, kid," he said, smiling. "I knew you'd bring her down." Others like Martha from the board approached me cautiously. "I didn't know what was going on," she admitted, wringing her hands. "But I saw it now. Thank you." I smiled, nodding. It felt good, better than I expected, to know that Claire's reign was over. But there was a bitter sweetness to it. I thought back to the months of stress, the sleepless nights, and how much this had cost me. It hadn't been easy. But for the first time in a long while, I could feel a real sense of peace. The war was over, and I had won. Claire Weston's downfall didn't stop with the court. As soon as the hearing ended, the legal wheels started turning fast. The charges against her were clear embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of power. It didn't take long for the authorities to move in. It felt surreal watching Claire being escorted out of her house in handcuffs. Her perfect blonde hair was a mess, her face streaked with tears. Her sons were nowhere to be found. They had retreated into their little bubble of privilege, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it now. The community held its breath as the news spread. The board members who had blindly followed Claire for years began resigning one by one. The HOA was in shambles, and there was no one left to protect her. The judge's ruling came down swiftly. Claire had to personally pay every cent of my legal fees. A small, satisfying victory, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about accountability, about showing Claire that no one, no matter how powerful they think they are, is above the law. A few weeks later, the neighborhood felt different. The tension that had hung in the air for years, the fear of Claire's wrath, was finally gone. It was like the community could breathe again. People started taking pride in their homes again, fixing things that had been ignored for too long, taking back control of their lives. I sat on my porch with Sarah, the same spot where it all started, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand and the sun shining on the freshly repaired fence. It was quiet, peaceful, real peace, not the fragile kind that Claire had forced on us. Sarah leaned into me, her hand resting on my knee. "We made it," she whispered, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Yeah, we did," I said, smiling. "It's over." I glanced at the orange stickers, still hanging on the fence, a little faded from the sun, but still there. They weren't just a reminder of the fight. They were a symbol of everything we had been through. They were the marks of victory, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. As the days passed, Claire's house was sold. No one in the neighborhood wanted to buy it, and eventually it was snatched up by someone from out of state. The HOA board was restructured, and Vinny of all people was nominated to join it. The thought of him sitting on the board with his flamingo collection in hand made me laugh. But maybe it was exactly what we needed. The final blow to Claire's empire came when the new board members decided to eliminate all the ridiculous fines and rules that had plagued the neighborhood for years. No more arbitrary restrictions on lawn ornaments, no more ridiculous approved color palettes for fences. The neighborhood was free finally. I didn't just win the fight. I'd helped the whole community reclaim its dignity. And that, I realized, was the true victory. As I sat back, feeling the weight of everything we had fought for, I knew one thing for sure: justice had been served. The Queen had fallen, and the community was finally free.